Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
Today's guest is a repeat. 3 years ago, when Health Coach Radio first got started, one of our earliest guests was Taren Gesell, or Triathlon Taren, as he's been known to his legions of followers on social media. As the owner of the most downloaded triathlon podcast and second largest triathlon YouTube channel, the last time he was here, Taren shared his journey of how he got started in the online health and fitness space after making a big transition out of the corporate world. Now, 3 years later, the Triathlon Taren brand has undergone a major renaissance. For one thing, Triathlon Taren isn't Triathlon Taren anymore. He's dropped the triathlon moniker in an attempt to move away from the punishing world of triathlon and toward a more holistic view of training for endurance events. And he's built a really innovative and novel training app, which was a large part of our conversation today. It's exciting and fun to catch up with pros working in this space who've been doing it a long enough time that we can catch up with them years later and see how their businesses have evolved. Our show's sponsor is Primal Health Coach Institute, an NBHWC-approved health coaching school. This means that our graduates can qualify to sit for the national board exam to become a board-certified health coach. You can learn more about this Master Coach certification track at primalhealthcoach.com/Master Coach. And while you're on our website, navigate on over to primalhealthcoach.com/Primal Pro and learn all about the done-for-you 12-week app-based health coaching program we've put together so that certified health coaches can hit the ground running with an effective and transformational health coaching program for their clients right out of the gate. We know that developing program materials and sourcing a client management solution are two of the most show-stopping, annoying hurdles in new coaches' ways. So we made Primal Pro for you. Check it out at primalhealthcoach.com/Primal Pro. As you're listening to this episode, please make sure to screen grab your podcast player and tag us in your Instagram stories at Health Coach Radio. And as always, the show notes for this episode and all previous episodes of our pod can be found at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get cracking. Please welcome our guest, the YouTuber formerly known as Triathlon Taren, Taren Gesell.
All right, we have another old friend in the house, one of the originals from the early days of our podcast, the man who was once Triathlon Taren, now Taren Gesell. Give us the inside scoop. Welcome back. Tell us a little bit about, well, I guess for those listening who missed the whole Triathlon Taren interview, why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory, remind our listeners kind of who you are, and we really want to spend some time contrasting with where you are now and why you're back on.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. As always, super fun to see your smiling faces. I would be best known if people looked up my name as Triathlon Taren. That's where I gained some notoriety on YouTube, and then we expanded into a podcast. We are and were the second largest triathlon podcast, is the largest in the world. The YouTube channel is the second largest in the world. We've published 4 books about helping people get to reach their triathlon goals. And it was all under very standard endurance training practices where I would film myself and talk about my journey in endurance sports. And it was the standard thing of go out and smash yourself and then chase PBs and chase longer and longer races. And in 2020, just before COVID came around, I was building up to try to qualify for the Ironman World Championships, which is everyone's big goal. And it was supposed to be this big year. And before COVID even happened, my body just started giving out after about 10 years of pushing myself. And we couldn't really figure out what was happening. I was gaining weight leading into it. I was doing about 13, 14 hours of training, nothing ridiculous, but I was getting sore. So we dropped the training down, and then I got sore even at 11 hours, and then sore at 9 hours, and then sore at 7 hours. So my body just wasn't keeping up with anything. And we essentially just stopped all training together. And still 2 years later, I'm suffering the health consequences of long-term endurance training. And I was doing things under the guidance of some of the best coaches in the world, but just doing things the way most endurance athletes do it, constantly pushing for more, constantly striving for longer and longer races and better performances. And what I've found is what I experienced with that health, the health side of what we're trying to do, suffering while my performance was getting better, is what a lot of people go through. And over the past 2 years, had to reinvent myself because this was happening very publicly, and learned that this is basically the plight of so many fitness people, regardless of what they're doing, whether it's endurance training or CrossFit or weightlifting or whatever it might be. This need to constantly have more and more is actually undoing a lot of the purpose of what we're trying to achieve, being healthier people and living a better life and living longer. There's actually a lot of evidence showing that that attitude of always searching for more is actually shortening our lifespan and our health span. So what I talk about now is more, how do you reach those endurance sports goals and those fitness goals while maintaining your health and enhancing your health, as opposed to maybe just getting a faster time, but undoing your health. So yeah, it's been a long and a little bit painful journey physically and emotionally and with our follower counts. But I think it's what the endurance world specifically, and a lot of the fitness world generally, needs.
Yeah. I have this part of my origin story where I was so darn fit, I had to walk with a cane because I just trained myself into, like, I trained myself into this tendinosis. I was 26 years old. I'm not even kidding. I had to walk with a cane. But okay, so Laura kind of kicked it off tongue in cheek, saying, you know, the guy formerly known as Triathlon Taren, and this is how you built up your following, right? And I know that you would go to triathlons and you would have like people running down, like shouting your name and wanting to, you know, get autographs. Like you had this level of fame in the triathlon community on the Triathlon Taren sort of brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that you picked a day, I guess in the last year, where you said, okay, I'm not that guy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
It was very needed. What was happening was I was still doing everything under the Triathlon Taren name, and people were expecting the old guy, going to races, smashing myself, documenting hard interval sessions that I did and the next biggest race that I was pushing for, and how can I get a little bit leaner and a little bit faster. That's the guy they were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy just stopped existing. Physically, I couldn't do it anymore. And COVID happened, so races weren't around. And all of a sudden, I had to find something else to fulfill myself with. And the comment section in YouTube was getting really, really nasty. People were expecting the old guy, and getting somebody that wasn't racing, wasn't pushing, was all of a sudden talking about balance and health and yoga and meditation. And they were like, I don't want this. I want the old guy. And as more of a ceremonial thing than anything, I just had to say, look, officially the old guy doesn't exist anymore. If that's who you wanted, you're going to have to go find somebody else. But if you do want to actually hear about how to accomplish your goals while still being strong and being mobile and being balanced, and maybe what you're just going to give up is that little bit of ego boost every day where you went, I smashed myself more than most people.
Right.
That's what you have to give up. But what you gain in it is health and strength and longevity and fulfillment and mental health and mental clarity. And if that's what you want, stick around. And I needed to do something big. So just changed the name. And personally, that was, I think, needed. I've always found that anytime I had really not lived a way that was true to myself, that it became very stressful, and that there was this tension inside me. And I had that tension of still being under the Triathlon Taren name and not really feeling like Triathlon Taren anymore. Right. So it was a relief when I did it. follower count wise, not very much of a relief, really painful experience, and still is, and probably always will be. And I think that'll be the start of the death of my channel. But I am more concerned about putting the right message out into the world than being untrue to myself and being untrue to what I feel the health and fitness industry needs.
Right.
Yeah. We see this sometimes when it comes to health coaching, particularly around nutrition, people who once built a huge following as, say, a vegan, that it no longer serves them. And yet they're owning this persona that they're not living anymore, and how terrifying it is to change that. Or the other way around. We also see this in the keto space. Folks that kind of made the name for themselves as this hardcore keto person who then suddenly learned, oh, you know what, maybe not everybody needs to be keto. Perhaps a more balanced approach might make more sense. So I think when you really dig deep into identifying something specific like that, we all evolve and change, and that's completely normal. But making that switch is really scary. I would imagine, for me, if I were in your shoes, I would almost feel guilty about letting those people down that had been following me for so long. And how do I make this switch and then, but still serve my following? And what I'm hearing you saying is maybe you can't, maybe it's a different following.
Yeah, it is a different following. It's very, very easy to build a persona online when you identify as a certain thing, and especially if that thing is in the zeitgeist. I always joke that had I been vegan triathlon Taren or keto triathlon Taren, my follower count would be 4 times as high, because all of a sudden people who ascribe to that practice are like, that's my guy. Okay, following him, absolutely. And I was just one step away from that being triathlon Taren. I wasn't just general health and fitness Taren. But yeah, I felt guilty that I wasn't giving people and wasn't going to give people the motivation that they had come to expect from me, and that I loved connecting with people and being able to be a small part of people's journey. But what has happened since is follower counts have slowed, some have shrunk. But I have been on more podcasts in the last 6 months than I had in the previous 3 years. The people that continue to follow us are now more thankful and more passionate about this new message than the people before. Because before I was kind of just an also ran. I was just saying the same thing that a lot of people elsewhere could say, and just following the crowd under a triathlon brand. And now I'm actually saying something unique, which is landing with people that want that balance and want that health and want that fulfillment. And maybe they've lost their drive for all endurance sports and they're wondering, how do they get it back? And those are the people that we're keeping in the sport and bringing back to the sport, as opposed to just being somebody else who had a little bit of fitness and a camera. So yeah, the people that it's landing with deeper than it was before, but the vanity metrics are much worse than they've ever been. And that is a bit of an ego shot, but I have to accept and understand that if I am truly trying to support true health, true balance, I have to get myself out of the mindset of focusing on those vanity metrics.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, big part of your sort of ascent to triathlon Taren was that you were like an age grouper triathlete who just got really got really good at triathlons and ended up on a bunch of podiums and qualified for a lot of big races. And there's like kind of an untouchableness to that, as though like, oh, this guy's a big deal. And then when you were really vulnerable and honest about your health concerns and the weight gain and the breakdown of your body and I'm a guy who's into total health and fitness, general health and wellness and mental health and all this stuff. Suddenly people can see themselves in you where maybe they couldn't before. Do you have a sense of do you think that might be what it is a little bit?
Actually, I would say it was the opposite. I think that they could see themselves in me more before. That in the early stages of the YouTube channel, I had borrowed bikes. I was still not super fast running. I didn't have all the fancy camera gear and a pool in my gym. And and bike sponsors and things like that. So people could really see themselves in me then. They could see somebody that was just like them going, hey, this person's really trying to make a go at it just like I am. And he's making progress. So that makes me think I could have progress. Okay, great. And then I kind of became untouchable and caught a lot of static because you get a big following and all of a sudden a pool company wants to give you a pool and bike companies want to give you bikes and you get free shoes and all kinds of new gear and you get flown all over the place. And the joke was that I was the age groupers pro. I was like the professional age grouper. And that little bit of realism is what turned me into Triathlon Taren. It is what resulted in the growth. And then it kind of went away when I became a little bit untouchable or different than what they could identify with. And then the recent shift, I think, is a very, how do I put this? It's a very unfortunate part of society, but a very understandable part of society, that while we talk about the Bell Canada Let's Talk Day and let's be open about mental health and let's be honest about our vulnerabilities, there's a point at which it becomes too real for people.
Yeah.
Being vulnerable 3 years ago, when the vulnerability was like, oh, having a really hard day, but I still got it done. That was the right amount of vulnerability that people liked. But when I come out and I say, I'm suffering from depression because of what has happened in the sport in the last few years and what's happened to my body in the last few years, people go, good for you for talking about it. I'm out.
Right.
It's just too real. And it makes them feel weak. And when we look at who has the most enormous followings in fitness, it's people that are strong with a teeny little touch of vulnerability.
Right.
It's David Goggins saying, be hard, like, and I got injured, but I'm still hard. And it's like, okay, I think that makes people feel strong themselves. And that teeny little bit of vulnerability can make them relatable, but I don't think it's real. I think people struggle way more than they're letting on. But when you start letting on that you're struggling quite a bit, and that it's largely due to the culture of fitness, that it just got the better of you. In the case that it got the better of me, people go, whoa. No, not into that. So I understand it, but it's an unfortunate part of it because it makes people think that you can't be vulnerable, that you have to be always staying hard and you always have to be shooting for more. And that's just not realistic. It's not healthy.
Right. Yeah. There's I don't want to like name names, but I probably will end up accidentally doing so. But there's a really pretty well-known fitness influencer guy, Instagrammer. He does all these crazy push-up flows and kettlebell flows. He's extremely fit, just a fitness guy. He's in the gym and he's like really handsome and he's very ripped and shredded and does all these crazy workouts. Yeah. I won't mention his name, but anyway, but he came out a few weeks, he kind of went dark on his Instagram profile for a little while. And then he posted a really vulnerable post that he was suffering through some depression relating to a health issue he was having, which kind of came out of thin air because it's like super fit dude. He posted that, he got a lot of support from people, then like literally deleted it and he went back to doing the crazy fitness stuff. And it's like, we saw that and we weren't mad about it. You like, it's okay. It's okay to, but I think that you're right, Taren. Like there's so much at play here. It's like the large following, the fitness industry, hustle, punish culture. It's just like all this stuff stacked up, and it's, I can imagine really hard to extract oneself from all of it. And so I just acknowledge you for boldly doing that. Cause I mean, I can't relate to what that would be like, not having a following like you have, but it's hard. It's hard to reinvent oneself in that way, especially when we're not celebrating the vulnerable. We're not celebrating the sort of pushing back on hustle culture. It's not celebrated. So it takes a lot of work.
Thanks. I understand why the hustle culture is so appealing. I've thought a lot about it, and from like a primal perspective, I think you would find this fairly interesting. And as I think about what generated evolution, it was competition. It was being faster, better, stronger, being able to run further, being able to run faster. It was always pushing more and more and more. And those were the creatures that survived. So of course, competition and like extreme competition, being obsessed about competition and being better than the person next to you is what's normal for us. What we've got now, though, is an unlimited supply of races and nutrition and science that like what we were able to push to prior to the last 100 years was self-limiting. You could only run as far as you were able to carry nutrition for, and you didn't have these enormous packs that you could carry on your back and aid stations everywhere and super dense calorie meals that you could go and essentially run for 500 miles in a race. It was very self-limiting. Now, all of a sudden, we have that same wiring in our brain to push and hustle and try to be better than the next person in every single thing that we're trying to do. But now we also have the medium to push so far that it's unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we have to recognize that life is under no obligation to keep us in a prime state of health. Life is under the obligation to keep us pushing. And you can very easily push into an unhealthy state.
How much of this too is folks that followed you originally seeing a little bit of what may be to come for themselves that is a little bit scary. I'm not there, and this is what he's telling me could happen if I'm not careful, but I'd rather put my blinders on because there's something they're getting out of that kind of training. No matter how it wears whether it's some sort of an identity, whether it's a community of other triathletes, whether it's the endorphin rush or the high, whatever it is, they're getting something out of it that they don't want to let go. And what they're seeing on the horizon is kind of what might be in store for them. And that's a little bit scary. What I'm curious about for you in making this transition, is it something that you have just sort of transitioned without any real announcement about this is what's going on? Or did you just come forward one day and be like, all right, from now on, I've told your story, this is happening and I'm making a switch? What did that transition look like? Because we've seen both, I think, from people that I follow, people that have just sort of completely rebranded and talked about why they rebranded and threw it out there. And then there's others that have kind of slowly changed over time. And never really made this big announcement, and their community just sort of morphed and changed with them. I'm curious as to kind of your approach.
I don't know if I did it the right way, but I had to rip off a couple of Band-Aids at two key instances. The first was early December 2021, about a year and a half or so after I started getting the first few inklings of my body giving out. And it just continued to give out more and more and more, and resulted in me going through depression. And what was happening as I trace it back is endurance athletes in particular, but athletes in general, have a rate of depression about twice the rate of the general population. A couple of the key reasons being that in endurance sports, you spend a lot of time with about 80% of the blood flow that used to be in your stomach in your extremities. So you develop leaky gut, your serotonin production is completely ruined. So you get a lot of neurotransmitter imbalances. And the two key things that result in athletic instances of depression are injury and underperformance.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of endurance athletes, according to Ironman University, go through an injury every single year. So there, check. Okay, we've got some depression setting in. And the culture is, what is your PB? What's your best time? How fast did you go? It's always how fast did you go? So every single race is did I reach my goal or didn't I? It's a pass or fail. And people tend to set stretch goals. So you're just wired to go through depression. I did, for all those same reasons. And I was trying to still be upbeat and uplifting, like, hey, I know COVID's got everyone down, races are canceled, but here's what you can do. But meanwhile, I felt like I was dying inside. Like I was getting suicidal. And it got to a point that we had to do a podcast with a friend who was a professional athlete who had gone through depression. And it was like a security blanket. She gave me the confidence to talk about it publicly. She did almost all the talking in that podcast. And I kind of just sat there, teared up, feeling the release of being able to finally talk about it publicly. And I had an outpouring of support from it. But that was actually the start of the follower counts coming down, because I think it was too real.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, the first inkling that things were about to change for the follower base, that they weren't going to get the same content, that it was going to be a little bit more balanced. And then later that year, in the fall of 2021, I had to do that ceremonial, rip the Band-Aid off and say, look, that guy that you expected to see, he's gone. It's just gone. Like you've been kind of hearing this a little bit over the previous year, but it's changed. So yeah, I think it might have been too harsh, and it gives people ammo to go like, oh, look, I knew it. I knew he was changing. I knew it was different. And the forums all go crazy about how it's all changed and that I'm weak and that I've trained myself into poor health. So how can people possibly listen to me? But I have to just take confidence that being open and honest and saying, well, because I trained myself into poor health, I think you should listen to me. I know the consequences. I've been through the entire process of learning how to do endurance sports, then getting fast at endurance sports, then getting my health undone by endurance sports. Okay, how can I get people to step 2 without step 3 happening and having to think through that? A lot of coaches go through that, but they just go, you know what? Let's just keep on with the suffer culture.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between your story and our guru, Mark Sisson, who also came through endurance sport at a very high level and wasn't shy about saying, yeah, that's not going to work for humans for any length of time. So start rethinking how you move your body and how you feed yourself. It worked out pretty good for Mark. So, but I think I don't want to keep belaboring how hard it was and how many followers you lost. And what were some really great moments that came out of this? Like, does anything spring to mind of like somebody or a comment maybe you received that was like, I've been waiting for somebody to start talking about this. I've been waiting to hear you. This has really helped me. Like, what have been some of the great shining moments since you've made this change that come to mind?
So we have an app that helps people train for endurance races in a healthy way, in a balanced way. And I'm not saying don't push yourself. I'm saying rethink the way that you push yourself and maybe change the schedule a little bit and the intensity that you go with. So we have that app that we are trying to grow and scale up. And one of the ways that we figure out what to do with the app next is we have a small little group of about 20 super motivators, we call them. They're people that we assign a whole lot of volunteer work of like, what does this feature feel like to you? Do you like this prototype? How's this language? Does this land right? And we had a group call about 3 weeks ago. And there was a woman in the group who's in her 60s and has very, very severe arthritis, and thought that she was going to have to give up the sport because she's in pain, and always felt this push of, unless you're doing Ironman and you're doing fast, you have no business in this sport and you're looked down upon. And with our app and our culture of what we're building and the methods that we use, she's not only able to do the sport, but she's able to feel good about it. And that's the big thing. Like, she feels empowered to do whatever she can. And some weeks that means she does 4 workouts. And I don't care if it's just 4 workouts. She gets rewarded in the app the same way that the person who does 14 workouts a week does. I feel as long as people are challenging themselves with whatever their personal world championship is, if they want to do a 5K race in 45 minutes, great. Cool. Like, congratulations. Big applause. If you want to try to qualify for the world championships, similar applause. Like, hey, no one is better than the other. And I spent that call really, really emotional, because it wasn't just her. It was almost everyone on that call that had a similar story about how they felt they were finally heard, and that it was finally okay to just do whatever they were capable of doing. And that's what I want to have happen in the endurance industry. I want people to feel okay about doing a 45-minute 5K and not starting it with the, well, I just do 45-minute 5Ks. No, you do 5Ks. Yeah. We're all doing, like, the I just do needs to go away. And that was a really touching call that we had there. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's great, because that's like, then you're able to kind of actually immerse in a small community of what you envision the bigger community to be, and to know that you're on the right track, because if it's working for this group of super motivators, feasibly it should scale out to everyone. So the app is a training app. And not just training though. So they have this balanced approach now. So we're talking mindset, we're talking, is there nutrition? Is there a meditative piece? Like, what kinds of things are built into this app, this training app?
So just simply put, people put in their race dates and how much they want to train, and it trains them for their races. But the methods that we use are a little bit different, as opposed to, let's say, the standard culture of, all right, year round, you're going to train like a mad person, and you're going to be super fit because 12 months a year you're grinding, and maybe you've got 2 weeks of downtime as a air quotes off season in November. Well, we have a 3-month off season with really unstructured, low intensity training. When people aren't in a training plan, the training intensity is really, really light and low, or insanely high, but for really short bursts. Right. It's kind of like the primal thing of move really fast once or twice a week to get that neuromuscular power and all of the muscle groups coordinating with each other, and the connection between the brain and the muscles turned on. And the training volume year round tends to be a lot lower. So people max out year round at 7 to 9 hours. But when they want to add in a race, then it starts ramping up. So the traditional culture is you're going to stay at this super high level of crazy fitness year round and then add in some races. We are saying you're going to stay at this challenging but appropriate and healthy level year round with a lot of strength training, a lot of mobility. And then by the time you want to add in a race and a training plan starts, you're healthy. Like, go figure. You're strong, you're healthy, you're mobile, you're cardiovascularly fit, you're metabolically flexible, so that you can actually accept that training plan to get ready for the race. And you grind up for the race for like 3 months, the same way everyone else does, but you're ready to accept it. And it's not 50 weeks of grinding with 2 weeks of downtime. It's more like 9 months of health-based training with 3 months of an increase. So it's just sort of flipping that focus of what you're doing on its head. And yeah, in the future, we are going to include meditation, and we are adding in some gamified elements to the app where we reward people for actually doing their low intensity work at low intensity and taking their rest days and getting rewarded for, hey, you just had a 2% slight increase in your heart rate to speed ratio. Doesn't matter if that means that you're still running 10-minute miles, you're being a better version of yourself. So the person is really just rewarded for challenging themselves wherever their level is at, as opposed to always doing more, which is sort of what the rewards are with the current culture.
So I would love to know more about how you went into bringing this app out, because I think with a lot of coaches, I know myself, I'm like, it'd be kind of cool to kind of like build my own app, but I don't have a clue how to build my own app. So, I mean, do you have this skill set? Have you hired somebody? Do you have a partner or investor that you're working with to bring something like what is the process that you go through to bring something like that to market?
I don't know how to write a single line of code. Like I maybe know how to add in a hyperlink. That's about it. I'm technically savvy. I'm not code savvy. So what I did about 3.5 years ago was I created a Kickstarter campaign where I mocked up how automated training could work with just a spreadsheet. And then I filmed a video about it to see if people were interested in it. And that was the first market test to see if people were interested in it. We raised $45,000, which was enough to build the first prototype of the app. And that also gave us a built-in bit of revenue to start right from day one. And from day one, which was a little over 3 years ago now, we just ran test after test after test of what features do we need to improve and include, and what type of branding is right, what type of language is right, what type of training do people want, all to create this thesis for what could be a scalable business in endurance sports. And along the way, we had a customer who was a really good developer reach out and said, your app sucks. So I offered him a job and he came in and became our lead developer. And he's now our co-founder and partner. We grew a little bit. So we had some money to hire developers in the Ukraine who are just absolutely fantastic. And my heart goes out to them with what they're going through right now. And they ran the development. And now that we have 3 years of data and knowledge about what levers we can pull in the app to increase growth and engagement, we're actually doing a fundraising round now to scale it up. So we went about it a little bit differently than most, as opposed to going and raising $2 million to build an app. We built an app and decided over 3 years, is this app worthy of really building? And now we're raising $2 million. So we've kind of de-risked a lot of it by going at it slowly for a few years, and now actually trying to scale up now that we have something, as opposed to going around with a PowerPoint deck and saying, hey, I want $2 million for an idea.
Yeah, vaporware. Interesting. It's interesting that it's been a 3-year endeavor, because that seems to be some kind of a magic number for building things that last. I don't know. I feel like I hear 3 years it takes to really work out kinks and build a thing that's got some legs. In the app, so because you mentioned when you were kind of describing a little bit about how it works, you can reward people for measurable improvements in fitness metrics. So is it actually syncing to a tracker of some kind? Does it sync to a Garmin or an Oura Ring and pay attention?
It syncs to currently Strava, Training Peaks, Garmin, Wahoo. In development and launching over the next couple of months, Polar and Suunto. Those are all the go-tos in the endurance world. We are looking at how do we start taking data from Oura and Whoop, their APIs and their connections to be able to tie into their software is not as great. It's not as well built out. But I think we might just get an open source HRV tracking piece of code and insert that so that we can actually automatically update users' workouts. If you had a bottle of wine last night, well, your workout today should be a little bit easier. If you're trending downwards and not able to keep up physically to the load of workouts, we can make about 3-4 days worth of workouts easier so that you can recover. If that happens twice within a couple of months, we might give you a cue to back off your training a little bit or recover a little bit better. All the things that a really good endurance coach should do, but in a lot of cases doesn't, we can do by creating these rules. And if we can get people excellent training for $14 to $20 a month instead of $500 a month, I think we're doing a really good thing for the endurance world.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of the difference between health coaching, which we're big fans of, and meal plans, which we're not. In the sense that the meal plan is a structured thing that's given to you and you follow it no matter what. Whereas health coaching or anything in the coaching realm should move with you, based on what's situationally kind of going on in your life. So it sounds like you've got this app built in such a way, because when I think about apps, I do get a little salty about apps sometimes. I don't know why. because I think I want the app to be able to pick up on the nuances of my lived experience. You know what I mean? So like if I do guzzle a bottle of wine, which I've been known to do, I would like the app to know, like, hey,
to recognize that.
yeah, you got to dial it back today. Today's not your day, versus maybe a written training plan that says, well, go do it anyway. And that's maybe we're in the risk of like some of these unnecessary stress responses, and the sympathetic nervous system kind of firing at a wacky level. And so I think it's nice. The nimbleness sounds nice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the downside to the two current options in endurance sports training are that they tend not to be flexible. The two major options are you hire a one-on-one coach, or you download a template training plan for $75 or $50 or whatever it is. The template training plan is that meal plan, and it's completely inflexible. It has nothing to do with the individual's fitness. Workouts can't be moved around. If you have two races, well, how do you prioritize one plan over the other? All these things that it just doesn't make sense. So a lot of people say, well, I have to then go hire a one-on-one coach. I actually looked at launching a one-on-one coaching business before doing this app, because building an app is hard. Just saying I'm going to be a one-on-one coach is really easy. But what I saw was the amount of work required to constantly be updating people's workouts every single day based on their current readiness. I'm going to be able to help 6 athletes. Mm-hmm. That's it. Right. But what happens is most one-on-one endurance coaches, they take on 12, 20, 30 athletes. And then when people say, hey, I feel like shit today, they go, oh, well, you're going to have days like that. And they go, no, I really feel like shit. Oh, well, there's going to be low moments in a training plan. Carry on.
Yeah. And
that happened to me. And I got so sick, so injured after 2017, even after I was saying to my coach, I'm dying here, man. I can't keep up with anything. And he went, well, plow on. And that is where I said, like, all right, we have to design a better way to do this so that people have to be honest with themselves about how they feel. They can't drink a bottle of wine and then go, well, I'm an 8 out of 10 the next morning. No, HRV is going to be honest and say, well, you're a 2 out of 10. Take it easy. So athletes have to be honest with themselves. And then B, you don't have this play of like a coach that really just doesn't want to do the work of updating 30 athletes' workouts every single day. You have an app that is by nature updating people's workouts every single day because that's what they need.
Yeah. I think this is just to close that out. Not to close it out, but this is a good point, because we always hear from business coaches that we interview on this podcast that, and it's just commonly believed that one-on-one coaching is not scalable. I push back on that a little bit because I think it is scalable in a way. I think you could get to the point of very, very, very high ticket coaching and, make a pretty nice living from an earning a living standpoint, but it's actually not scalable from a coach attention standpoint. Like you do become over leveraged, and then you're not giving your clients everything they need. And that's when your flag should go up. Like, I am not being attentive to these individuals. I have too many clients in my roster.
Yeah. That's what happens with the best coaches in the world in triathlon. They just know that to give people good coaching, they can have about 5-6 athletes.
Yep.
And they charge $1,500 a month to do it, because that's what they need to charge to make a living. And there's very, very few athletes that are going to pay that. So most charge $150, $200, and then they just take on a bunch of athletes. So then their attention isn't scaled.
Yeah. So as I'm listening to this whole story, at first I really kind of thought maybe kind of this niche of like recovering triathletes or recovering, endurance athletes. But now I'm hearing with this app, this could be, I guess my question is who are you really looking to serve here? And is it multi-purpose? Because I could see this as a tremendously useful app for folks that want to move in this direction without blowing themselves up. So I can see this being useful for people that are just entering the endurance realm, but also useful for those that really just sort of need to recover, but they don't want to give it up. So I'm just curious, in your mind eyes, kind of making this switch, what are you focused on?
Yeah, who it's best for is an athlete who wants excellent performance, but maybe is just willing to stop that one step shy of their absolute best physical possible performance ever while giving up their health. So our athletes tend to actually perform better than they ever have, even though they train lighter than they ever have, because go figure, they're healthy. And hey, well, before you know it, that actually results in good performance. But where we aren't a fit is the person that says, look, I don't care about health. I want to see what I am possibly capable of doing. That's where I think a one-on-one coach is really good. So about 30% of endurance athletes use a one-on-one coach. 70% don't. The number one reason is because of cost, not because they don't want good training. So we want to make the cost 14 to 20 bucks a month to get good training. But the key premise for those people tends to be that it is lifestyle focused. They want to challenge themselves, but they're doing it because they want to change their health and they want to feel better and they want to look better. They're less focused about how fast they can possibly get to the detriment of everything else. So that's who we don't work with, is the person that says, look, I'm willing to lay it all on the line and I'm going to get to the Ironman World Championships no matter what. We don't deal with those athletes. We deal with the athletes that just want really good training. And in a lot of cases, they end up doing better than they were before, but we just don't lead with that. You're going to be faster, because it's going back to the mental health side of things. I think when you lead with the promise of we're going to make you faster, it just instantly gets into the mindset of, well, faster is better. So therefore, the top 10% fastest athletes in our app are therefore better than everyone else. And you should all be focused on getting better and faster, which I don't agree with. I think that you should be developing better habits and a focus on being a balanced person and then being a balanced athlete, which then makes you a good triathlete or endurance athlete. And it's just flipping what the first focus is to get that performance.
Cool. Very cool. I think the exercise of identifying and articulating who you don't work with is just so crucial. I think everybody should do that one at some point, no matter what you're doing. Like, it really helps to clarify. A lot of times when we're teaching aspiring coaches to, create their niche, their target audience, their ideal client, they struggle. It's like, well, start by who you don't want to work with, and that you can kind of back into it from there. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah. You can always get bigger by expanding, but you can't really get big in the first place. Like, never mind the bigger. You can't get big in the first place if you don't have your exact target client. I focused on beginner triathletes at the start, and now I'm focusing on general endurance athletes who want to train healthy, which is much bigger. I couldn't have started with that,
right?
But I can back into that after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So we covered sort of your renaissance from Triathlon Taren to now just Taren. Just Taren. And this in your app is called Motive. Is that what it's called?
Motive. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. We do like to, and we talked about, endurance training and the process of building an app. I'm just really curious about sort of like your business, because, you kicked this off doing your origin story saying, we wrote some books. We had the biggest second biggest YouTube channel. We have the biggest podcast. Who's we? Like, what is the Motive, formerly known as Triathlon Taren, organization look like? And what's sort of your vision organizationally?
Well, the full-time employees are my wife and I. Mm-hmm. The full-time equivalent employees would probably be another 8 or 9 people. There's a lead developer and a lead designer who are co-founders, and they're down in Australia. And because they're down in Australia, they're technically not employees. They both work on it full-time. The team of developers in the Ukraine is anywhere from 6 to 12 people, depending on how many features we're rolling out and the breadth of the features. We also have an email marketer. It's a lot of Upwork people. Upwork is fantastic.
Yeah.
The vision is probably be about 20 full-time people at full capacity. But the general vision is to be the number one choice for athletes that are looking to do a triathlon, get good training in a healthy and budget conscious way. So we want to be as good as a one-on-one coach, but as cheap as doing it yourself. And to do that, we're looking at 100 to 200,000 paying athletes. We're a long way away from that right now. And I knew that we would be a long way away from that. The entire focus of what we've done over the last 3 years is really just how do we make enough money to keep our head above water and develop a little bit and run some tests and develop a thesis that we think could scale. And that was never going to be something that would be a long-term business, a very viable business for decades to come, a scalable business, because at that small little level, you just can't do a whole lot to actually create a large, significant business that makes a dent in the world. But it was, how do we sell some books or some courses or a sponsorship that gives us enough money to pay the developers so that we can run these tests? And now we're raising a couple $1 million to actually do that scale up, because I think we've got enough understanding of the app and the industry to actually take some money and do good things with it. Had that money been given to me 3 years ago, I'd be like, I'll build an app. I don't really know how to do it. I don't really have a team to do it. I don't have a CTO. I don't have a co-founder. I don't have anything. It's really been 3 years of figuring it out. And now I think that we can be a good steward of investors' money. Now's the time to actually move on from focusing on just being a social media person and actually being a business person.
I love that. So tell me, so you and your wife are the two full-time actual employees, and you've got other people. So would you mind telling us a little bit about what your role is specifically within the company, and say, well, who writes the programming?
Oh, I don't even know most days.
Well, I mean, because I know it's right about now, and here's the point I'm trying to get. Right about now, it's probably multiple hats, right?
Yeah.
But to a certain degree, starting from the beginning, there's got to be some benefit to kind of some defined roles and leaning into your strengths versus what your wife does best and kind of her focus. And then where you went into, I guess, going out and finding other experts in areas that you just needed help with. So I'd love to just your thought process, the process that you went through to define all that.
That's a really good question. I tend to think in about 3-month chunks, as opposed to thinking through, all right, here's a 60-month business plan. I think in 3-month chunks. What are the highest leverage things that I can do myself over the next 3 months that is going to further the business? Because 6 months, or any further than 6 months down the road, it's largely just a guess, but within 3 months, you've got a lot of control. So I've always just focused on what can I do over the next 3 months. And that dictated when we start hiring people, who we hire, why we hire them, because you know exactly what you need and what you intend to do in the next 3 months. What I do day to day now is probably about 4 hours a week of content production. That's kind of on autopilot right now. Because I joke that I'm in about minute 14.7 of my 15 minutes of fame. So we're still putting out some content, but there's going to be a future where I'm not putting out content anymore. The main focus is on the app, and the two main roles that I have with that are fundraising. As a CEO, you've got to go out and tell your story a whole lot of times. So I've probably done 60, 70 presentations about what we're doing to possible investors in the last 6 weeks. And the other thing is I would be the product manager. I'm kind of the voice of the customer, because I am the guy who started with not being able to run and swim and bike, and then got to be fairly decent at all those things, thinking, what does the app need to do for a user? I'm the voice of the customer, and I think through, all right, what's the next feature? What's a way that we can make this feature supportive and not competitive? Things like, as opposed to small little decisions like, all right, I want the social media community in our app to be positive and not competitive. So instead of having a like button on posts, we have a high five, because a like button has an opposing dislike, or a Reddit upvote has an opposing downvote. So there's always a negative. A high five doesn't have like a punch in the face as a thing. So by nature, we have to start thinking like, okay, how do we foster this positivity? And doing small things like that take a lot of time. So those would be the three main things: the content, the fundraising or / financial management, business management, and product management. That will probably change 6 months from now if we raise this round of fundraising. All of a sudden, then I'm going to be more of a CEO, and everyone else is going to be doing the things, and I'm probably not going to be the product manager. So it's just constantly always changing. And to say that I have a process for it would kind of be glamorizing me sitting and just like thinking broadly about what do I do in the next 3 months. It's always just been as simple as that.
Nice. Do you know what I think is really exciting about this conversation is that I believe that literally anybody listening who's a practicing health coach of any kind could be at a point in a few years' time where they have something very big in the works like this. I actually think it's possible for anybody.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you knew me the very first time we met, Aaron. I was an investment advisor and didn't have a single video uploaded. And I didn't grow this audience because I was super good looking or super talented or a great video editor or anything like that. I always just kept putting out content or products or whatever it was that in the next 3 months, I think thought was the best thing that I could do. Mm-hmm. And it just grew and grew and grew and grew over and over. And I, of course, do have a thought of like, all right, down the road, what could I possibly be? But I didn't really create plans today based on that 5-year vision. I created plans today based off the next 3 months. And 3 months strung together over and over and over amounts to a hell of a lot of progress.
Yeah. Begin with the beginning in mind. I tell my clients this all the time. I use this analogy that one time during COVID, the first lockdown 2 years ago, pretty much to the day that we're recording in March 2022.
Yeah,
but
hey.
I went for a walk. I went for one walk, and this kind of still winter time, right? So it's like, it's kind of a pain in the butt to go for a walk. I went for one walk, and the next day I went for one walk, and then the next day I just went for a walk. I just went for a walk every day, and 2 years later I had a 365 times 2 days consecutive walking routine, but beginning by the beginning in mind. And the reason I'm bringing this dumb analogy in is because we go back to like the fact that you had built a following, which a lot of people think is what they need. It's what they want. And it doesn't feel important to them to do the work today when nobody's listening. It's like, well, no one's listening. So what's the point? It's like, because they will be eventually, like they will. So some people don't even get started because they have nobody to listen. There's nobody to speak to. There's no one to make content for. It sounds like you did it anyway. You're like, no one's listening, but I'm doing it anyway. Because in 3 months, maybe 10 people will be listening. And then, maybe 100 people.
I didn't even start out with the followers in mind. I just started with, I want to make some videos because I think it would be fun.
Yeah.
So I think that is something to think about is, what can you do over the next 3 months that you're going to enjoy? Yeah. If you're doing anything over the next 3 months because you think it's going to make you money, but you hate it, like that's not going to last very long. I would have given up on this channel 5 years ago had I not been enjoying creating content, because it was a good 4.5, 5 years before it actually made enough money that it was all we had to do. It was always just a side project.
Right.
And I love the idea. So, of having, you've got a general direction, the direction you want to go and the things you want to achieve. You have these goals of trying to help these people enjoy endurance sports, but in a healthy way. And you have this broad goal, but rather than focusing on this 5-year, I want to get to that goal that just seems huge, that in many cases, if things don't go the way things are expected tomorrow, take you completely off course, just focusing on the next 3 months, I think makes things feel a lot less overwhelming and achievable.
Yeah, I actually stopped getting invited to speak to my business school as a graduate many years ago, because in business school, all they talk about is like, all right, envision yourself as the CEO and you've got a plan for that 10-year project. And you can start a Fortune 5,000 company or whatever it was. It was all just like these crazy ideas about burn the ships behind you and take risk. And I would go in and I'd say, okay, don't quit your jobs. If you want to start something, start it at nights and on the weekends. If you hate it, you're probably going to stop working at it, which is a good thing because then you still got your job.
Right.
So just do that, do a little bit and see if you like it, and then a little bit more. And that all of a sudden, I think is way more attainable because you're not like, okay, I've got to give up this $100,000 a year job. And then how do I actually make that up in 6 months? If you just say, all right, start it as a side hustle right from the start, it can turn into something big. And I don't think the professors really liked that because it was, I don't know, it just made way too much sense for a business school. And I think it's what people need to hear because they might actually take that side hustle step, whereas quitting their job to start something is a massive risk that if it doesn't go well, there's big time consequences. So then B, people just won't do it because it's unfathomable to do.
It's stressful. It's stressful. And I think, this hustle grind culture that is inherent in endurance sports and inherent in the fitness industry is also inherent in entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, it's like, it's going to straight up suck for the first few years, but if I really care, it's like, it actually doesn't have to suck. It actually could be really fun. It could just be a fun thing that you do. And I think there's something to be said about like, if you're just stepping into it with joy and passion and having fun, you'll want to do it more, and then it will have the chance to grow. If it feels like a drag, it just won't. I'm so opposed to this idea of leaping. Take a leap.
Yes.
Like, let me just take a tiptoe.
I think the leap is stupid. When I first started the channel, I was an investment advisor. The next year, I had sold my investment practice and I was managing a company's social media and doing the triathlon stuff on the side. The third and fourth year, I had started a social media consulting company, but that company that I was working for in year 2 was my first client. So like there was never a point where I leapt at all. And that allowed me to just without question keep going in the YouTube channel because I always had an actual paying job. And there was just 1 month where we were making enough off of the triathlon stuff. And my last social media consulting client just didn't renew. And I went, meh, okay. All right. But it was 4 years to get to that point where I was able to actually do that.
Thank you. We keep talking about that. Look, I mean, I think at the end of we were just talking about this with another podcast guest about the value of maintaining a paycheck in the beginning creates the financial bandwidth for you to be able to invest back in the business, continue to grow, because your main bills are kind of paid for. And to your point, you remained working, but were able to shift what you were doing for that paycheck to create the time you needed or the bandwidth that you needed to continue to keep growing and do something new. So there's so much value in that. It's a lot less stress. I mean, don't get me wrong, you're busy. I think a lot of people would love the luxury to just quit their job and focus 100% on doing something like that. And, but the percentage of people that have the ability to do that is teeny.
Yeah.
Teeny. But I'll tell you, even sometimes those people, I see this sometimes with folks who, perhaps they're in a relationship and the other partner has the financial means for them to be able to leave and quit their job and focus on something. But inevitably, there's many times some other obstacle that kind of gets in the way. So don't let that, hey, I can't afford to take this big leap, stop you from taking the step. Because, for every step you take, to your point, for every step you take, you look back 20 steps later and you see how far you've come. So I just think it's great. And I'm super excited for this evolution in your business and this change you've made and just the courage that it took to finally just be honest about kind of, hey, maybe training like this really isn't right for everybody. Probably isn't.
Yeah, I hope that it is a very good thing in the world. And I believe that it will be. Otherwise, we'd shut down our app and I'd move on and probably get a real job. But I will say to any health coaches, fitness coaches that are listening to this, don't expect that to go over very well, because the fact of the matter is that, I mean, Erin, you talk about this a lot on your Instagram, that I think you had a day that you just said, I'm just over the fitness industry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fitness industry really, really relies on those super fit, super hustle culture, super work hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people gravitate towards the purple cow, the thing that looks wild and insane. And that is the super ripped person, the super fit person, the person that's going to run 200 miles, the person that's doing a bloody headstand while juggling kettlebells. Like, that's the stuff that people are going to stop on. So don't expect it to go well. But I think if you can position yourself as, yes, you can accomplish your goals, but in just a little bit of a different way, you're still being that purple cow, but in a bit of a different method. So yeah, don't expect the balanced message to go over very well. But I think there is a way to spin it to be a positive force in the health industry.
Yeah. I think our opportunity as coaches in terms of the spin is connecting to what was known as the intrinsic motivator. So if somebody wants to stand on their head and juggle kettlebells, why? What about that feels important to you? And there's got to be some reason why that feels important to somebody. Similarly to why it feels important to me to never talk about weight loss again. If I can help it, I would love to never talk to people about weight loss again. And why that's important to me is because this, and this. And if I can get clear on my intrinsic motivator, why that's important to me as a coach, that's going to resonate with some community of prospective clients. It will, but I have to get really clear on why it's important to me. So I would encourage health coaches to do that work. And, there's room for all of us. There's room for the upside down kettlebell jugglers, 100%, for sure. And anything else in between. I feel like that's really crucial. When you think about, your minimum viable audience, you don't need to appeal to everybody. In fact, you shouldn't. Start with one person, start with one client, start with 10 clients. And how can you bring those people together? What is the uniting factor? And just be just double down on it.
Mm.
That's what I say.
I like it. I'm into that.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So tell us where the app is heading. So what stage are you in? Where do you think you're going to be in the next 3 months? And how can people kind of follow
the next 3 months, hopefully we can wrap up this fundraising round, because everything that you hear about startups and CEOs doing fundraising and it being a heart-wrenching experience is exactly right. It is. You go from one meeting where you're like, they're writing a check for $3 million for sure, they love me, to somebody just told me our idea is terrible. It happens within like 60 minutes of each other. So hopefully we can wrap this up fairly quickly and just move on to executing and growing the app and being that positive force and being a well built out app that I think we've probably got a year of development ahead of us to have all the features that we want, but we're really, really close. And at that point, I think we can be something that actually even expands the amount of people that do endurance sports, because it's easier to just sign up for an app and pay $15 a month than it is to pay somebody $200 a month and find that coach and trust that coach. So yeah, we want to be able to have that excellent driving force in endurance sports. And next 3 months, yeah, hopefully we can wrap this up and just get on with it.
Okay, so doubling down on the app, are you still doing the podcast? Is that going to be for a while or?
Yep, for sure. Yeah,
Great.
Still doing the podcast is the one thing that I don't know if I'll ever stop that.
Okay.
Ever would be a strong word, but that's the one thing that, because it's very deep conversations and you really get to know somebody in a way that is very unique. Like, I might have said this to you once, that if you sit down next to somebody at a wedding and you start peppering them with questions, they'd be like, oh, get away from me, weirdo. But you say, well, would you like to talk about yourself for an hour and a half on a podcast? They go, oh, hi. Ooh, okay. I'd love to. And you get to learn a lot about people. I love that. The YouTube channel, I'm going to be 40 next year. There aren't a whole lot of 40-year-old YouTubers, and YouTubers do have a lifespan of 2 years. I eked about 4 really good years out of it. And I've done 1,500 videos and do kind of recognize that I've sort of said what there is to say. I think I have another year's worth of content to put out there as like my stamp on this is the entire library of content that I want to have out there. And then it'll probably wrap up within the next year or two.
Cool. Okay. Wow. Exciting times.
Yeah. So how do people, you're not going by Triathlon Taren anymore, right? Do you have a
Still am on Instagram because I have the blue check mark and they won't let me change it there. But Taren's Motive Method, MOTTIV, is what I changed everything to. Our website is mymotive.com.
Cool.
Awesome.
Really exciting.
Yeah, it's fun. It's really fun to think about transitioning from being a social media person to a business person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's always what I wanted to be, and being able to stay in the endurance sports world, when really, if I look back at why I started the YouTube channel and what success meant to me then 7 years ago, it was if I got free energy bars. And we've surpassed that by quite a bit. And to be able to actually have something that I think is a force for really good things in the endurance sports world is just surreal. And I owe it to the followers and our team around us.
Cool. I have one more finishing question though. I'm just curious, like if, like when the app is like firing on all cylinders, it's huge, it's your main thing, and maybe you're not a social media presence anymore, like would you feel sad having lost like some of that fame, or are you cool to let some of it go?
Well, it's fine. I don't know the exact answer. I can tell you that I thought that I don't need that fame. Let's just call it air quotes fame, or the recognition from people. But then last week I went down to Florida for a race for the first time in 2 years. And all of a sudden people were like, hey, can I take a selfie with you? And I was like, oh my, yes. Oh, stop. So I think you just have to find fulfillment in other things. I think that it is an honor to be known and be a part of other people's journey, for sure. There's just other ways that I can do it, by, as opposed to a few thousand people watching our videos every single day, hundreds of thousands of people that are getting to their own races every single year is just a different way to impact them. And yeah, I think there comes a time where, I don't know, in your 40s, it's not as cool as when you're in your early 30s to be a social media person, or at least that's the way it's feeling.
Okay, cool. Really cool. Really great. Thanks for coming back on, Taren, and giving us the update. Looking forward to seeing how it pans out.
Thanks for having me. Super fun.
It was. Thank you so much.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.